English rock band from Devon. They started as a high school band as Gothic Plague. They were renamed Rocket Baby Dolls in 1994. They won a local battle of the bands, quit their jobs, and changed the name to Muse because it looked better on posters. They released their first album in 1999, and they've released 8 more since then. They've sold huge numbers worldwide and are consistently praised for their artistry. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of the album Black Holes and Revelations by Muse. That was their 4th studio album, and it was released in 2006. It's not my first encounter with this album. In fact, it's the second time I've reviewed this album. Before I did YouTube reviews, I had a blog where I did some reviews, which had a readership of about 5. And then before that, I did some reviews posted on Facebook for friends to see. This was one of those that got posted on Facebook. I don't know Muse well, but I probably know this album the best out of the albums of theirs. And you'll get it from the score and from the comments. I really like this album. So I often start off with, well, I usually always start off with some description, but I usually start that with trying to do some genre holing. Acclaimed Music, which is where my list is from, has listed this as alternative rock. Wikipedia is often more expansive in its list of genres. It lists it as alternative rock, progressive rock, space rock, hard rock, and electronic rock. And often with Wikipedia, it's it says there's elements of all these things in here. So I'm going to start with rock. Certainly, that word applies. They tend to blend rock instruments and electronics in quite an effective way. And they produce this huge sound, which has a tendency to build over time. A lot of their songs kind of start quite quiet and then just build, and sort of big climax towards the end. That kind of hugeness and build, and sometimes some relatively complex bits of rhythm, is probably where they get labelled as progressive rock. I'm not convinced that they're particularly progressive, although I do think that they're the kind of music that appeals to people who like progressive rock. If you like this sort of thing, then you might describe it as being massive, expansive, theatrical, and strong. If you don't, you might describe it as being overblown and self-indulgent. The stuff that I saw on I'm going to say other critics, I don't count myself as a proper critic, their comments on this were mixed, and some of them, their reaction against it was due to this kind of massive overblownness, as they would put it, of this. I'm going to have to quote the Pitchfork review for this. So quotes, the band's most autopiloted effort yet, a hacked up last gen rehash of said space jams, only now with greater emphasis on glitz and glam. Somehow Muse, always lovably lame, have managed to take a turn for the lamer. They didn't like it. I'm quoting that because I so strongly disagree with that, I think. I'm in the first camp out of these two. I love stuff that's got this big theatrical feel to it. I love stuff where there's some really obvious technical musical skill going on, and this definitely has that as well. Musically, as well as the kind of multi-layeredness, which gives this big sound. Sometimes with arpeggios going on, often keyboards, it's got sounds where I just imagine that you're holding a key and it's going kind of arpeggiating stuff. It tends to also have a rolling on, endless feel, which was helped particularly, I think, by the drumming, which emphasises the toms, and patterns that tend to build and push forwards, a bit like slightly technical, the motoric, which was what part of the foundation of space rock and krautrock, particular drum patterns. The other thing is that they tend to have longer chord sequences than average. So most rock songs will tend to have chord sequences that are like 4 bars or 8 bars, whereas Muse tends to more the 16 bars, which tends to make it move on in more of a way. Those things, that kind of moving on feel, is where the space rock description comes from. I would say definitely. There's generally a feeling of energy and urgency, and a feeling almost as if they're hanging onto a wagon when the oxen have bolted and they're only just in control. And I know, of course, that it is really well produced and they're fine musicians, and so that impression is something deliberate rather than they are actually out of control. But it's a great feel. I'm going to pull out a couple of tracks. So, City of Delusion has an orchestral string section followed immediately by electronic muting, which is where you get the sound and make it you make it more kind of bring the brightness out. It's also got mariachi trumpets. In general, on the album, Spanish and Moorish feels come in to a fair amount. I don't often comment on the cover art, but the cover art here also gives that kind of feeling of the south of Spain and hot desertness. With the track I'm going to talk about is Soldier's Poem, which is very different actually to a lot of the rest of the album, because it's a short and almost acoustic number, and it's a nice change of pace. All of this musically would be enough for me, and I would love it anyway. But on top of this, I really like Matt Bellamy's voice, so I'm going to talk a bit about that. He's got what I am starting to call this is my term, a sing-through voice, which means that he holds on the note until the next note, so that almost always there's some note going on. A lot of pop rock singers, there's lots of gaps in between, and they're quite cut off and snack, whereas he doesn't. He sings through, and it's similar to Rufus Wainwright, Jeff Buckley, and Tom York. I would say are 3 people who have this style of voice. He's got a really powerful voice. It's got a feeling of kind of, again, it's this feeling of wildness and slight out of control, but actually it's technically very good, which is a characteristic that I associate with Bono and Roy Orbison, particularly. So, um, it's just as well that he's got this strong voice to go with the music, because otherwise the power of the music would dwarf many singers. But on this occasion, it's a marriage of kind of equals, the vocals and the music. So it works. I love it. They're really competent, and yet it's quite emotive. It creates a great feel. Some interesting songs in here. I haven't really talked about the lyrics at all, but they're worth picking into. I just think it's a great listening experience, which is why I have listened to it a few times over the years. If I feel in the mood to listen to a Muse album, it's usually this one that I'll pick to listen to. Of course, these days, almost all of my listening is for these reviews, so I get less choice, but a whole lot of delights that I get along the way, which is great. And one of them is revisiting this album again. That's what I think of this album. As always, I'd love to know what you think. So please share your thoughts with me about this album by leaving a comment. And if you're liking what I'm doing, why not subscribe and come along with me on this journey to visit these amazing albums? But that's it from me for now.
Come into my life, progress into a dream. We were